Welcome to my garden, the GinGee GoodEarth program. We're enjoying a healing music album by Irene Goodnight, and you can get her videos and her album CDs by writing to her in Beaufort, South Carolina. So again, I want to welcome you to the GinGee GoodEarth show. This is production 10, Roman numeral 10, but part Roman numeral V, because we're continuing with the book on the Vikings. So it's part V, Roman numeral 5, part 7. And then again, the thumbnail on the video will be the red robin in a bloomed plum tree to continue the reading on the book, The Vikings. Again, I welcome you, Ginger Lily here, your director of the GinGee GoodEarth program. You can find me on Etsy.com store, Wild Trout Lily, for questions and for purchasing books Honey for All, White Buffalo Spirit, Pittsburgh Victoria, and All That Is Gilded. I direct the Pittsburgh Victorian Gibson Girls since 1996. This is September 2nd. It's my birthday. So this is a program I love that card. So we'll play that card at the very end of the show. But we're going to get a lot covered today, and it's an exciting day. It's my birthday, and I want to read some wonderful God-sent messages. The home will go before you. The Lord will go before you. So, isn't that a nice house? A little dreamscape of winter wonderland. And again, my program today is going to feature the Scandinavian countries. Scandinavian is a sub-region in Northern Europe with strong historical, cultural, and linguistic ties. Velkommen. The term Scandinavia in local usage covers the three kingdoms of Denmark, Norway, and Sweden. And I always give a shout out to Sanity for Sweden. His YouTube channel is wonderful, and also Globalists of Sweden, and it talks about how to save their culture in Sweden. So the title is, to attract you to his channel so that you can learn about the geopolitics of Sweden, because they're doing a great momentum of purpose to save their land, their constitution, and their culture. And so I hope I can be a help with that by reading books on Norway, and also give some topics of review. And let's look at my stage set for my video, GinGee GoodEarth. I have a Brazilian doll, and then I have a Mexican, first American from the Americas, and then I have a Victorian doll. And again, I direct the Pittsburgh Victorian Gibson Girls, and I have a 40-member choir, and I have been the director of the very first 125th anniversary of the Henry Clay Frick Chapel in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. There's two Scandinavians in their costumes and dancing. And then I'm going to pan up above because I have a costume that I sew. This costume I'll be sewing, making reproductions of this is a Norwegian dress. And again, they have tribes in Scandinavia. They have many tribes of people. So we want to remember that. And their history is very rich and so forth. And again, I do talk a lot about American history because I have many books on that, and I enjoy the history of America because my mission is to read the book A Universal History of the United States of America, which reviews the Constitution of America and the Bill of Rights, and we are a republic, a democratic society that includes everybody, we the people, the Declaration of the Independence. And we'll go more into that because I'm going to be reading about it. And there is a blue coat revolutionary doll. And then we have Uncle Sam. And again, he was a big promotion to get people to serve in the armed forces. And then I have my dragon teapot. A lot of people like seeing that. And that's from Holland. That was made in Holland. And I have a First American woodland Indian. And again, my production is GinGee GoodEarth. So that gives a little rundown. And I'm going to try to do 3 videos today. But we're going to go right into the book on Norway. And here's another card I wanted to show you. An illustration of a peace up and a sleigh of roses with a cabin. And this says, "The fear of the Lord is a fountain of life, to depart from the snares of death." So that basically is telling you the fountain of beauty, the fountain of life. Let's grasp onto that. The peace dove, the world's about peace, not war. And we want to promote peace, joy, love, and prosperity in our lives. That's a beautiful card. You should redraw it, repaint it for your own scrapbook. Here's another one that's very pretty with daisies. "His mercy endureth forever." And again, these are Psalms out of the Bible, and you can look them up. And I enjoyed reading that to you. And I have something special. Yeah, so what's something going on is that there are way too many organizations, or, capitalism, production, and they're consolidating every type of business in agriculture, in steel, and so forth. And I'll read an article. And again, I'm a famous Lindt chocolate purchaser of coffees and chocolates. And this article pertains to this. Girardi, Russell Stover, they're fined $750,000 over chocolate packaging. Sacramento, California, Girardelli and Russell Stover have agreed to pay $750,000 in fines after prosecutors in California said they offered a little chocolate and a lot of wrapping. That's a quote. They offer a little chocolate and a lot of wrapping. Prosecutors in Sacramento, San Juan, Shasta, Fresno, Santa Cruz, and Yolo counties sued the candy makers, alleging they misled consumers by selling chocolate products in containers that were oversized or predominantly empty. Prosecutors also allege that Girardelli offered some chocolate product containing less cocoa than advertised. The firms didn't acknowledge any wrongdoing, but agreed to change their packaging under a settlement approved earlier this month. A $750,000 fine. Some packages will shrink or will have transparent windows so consumers can look inside. San Francisco-based Ghirardelli and Kansas City-based Russell Stover are owned by a Swiss company called Lint and Sprungli, Sprungli. So now, you know, they have bought out American brand names, and then they, you know, umbrella that under one roof. And I don't know if that's such a great idea, because then you don't have the variety that you would if you had separate owners of separate chocolate industries. Okay? Again, I want to show this wonderful picture of the dancers, Scandinavian dancers. So let's get a shot of that. And then I'm going to turn down the music so I can read the book, The Vikings. It's kind of funny. This is my very close friend, Irene Goodnight, and she says, everybody likes to do their own thing, and some like to swim. And that's exactly, she has me described exactly in that song. Anyhow, here's a nice close-up of the Scandinavian dancers. Isn't that nice? What a beautiful picture. So, here, let's put it over here. So very artistic. And again, the shoes, the socks, the pants, the skirts, the blouses, the hats, the scarf, the florals, the belts, you know, everything's included. So I wanted to share that with you. And I was thinking, you know, one time, how many products do I see in the store that are actually marketed in America? And again, you'll always see the symbol with the white cross in red background, that this was made in Switzerland, this product here, which is very close to the Scandinavian countries, Finland, Switzerland, and it's a picture changer box. It's called Pictures in Motion. So I found that, but most products that we see are made in, and you're going to know the answer, most products that we see are made in China. Now see the dragon here? That's a scorpion tail. Now just imagine, and that's a picture from one of the shops in New York City, a leather shop, and now, you know, everything's boarded up, you can't shop. So I'm really glad. 2 years ago I was in New York City and I took pictures of everything, and I took a picture of everything that was inside the Metropolitan Museum of Art. So I had a great day, and you know, again, I'm a museum enthusiast. I was on the board of directors 16 years at the Alakiski Valley History Museum, and my mother being an architect was a big museum onlooker to visit and participate in the activities of art history. So I have a love for museums. And it's my birthday today. I just love that. And again, she's a Viking, so I just thought it was very appropriate to put her in the video today. And now we're going to get into the book. We left off on chapter 3, The Voyage to Greenland. So this is going to be part 7, and I'm going to go ahead and read. And there's the Norwegian culture dress. Okay, and there's a sunset. We can move this up a little bit so you can see the picture show. I have 635 pictures. Okay. The voyage to Greenland. In any country outside the Scandinavian north at that time, people would have thought EricThe Red quite mad. He proposed sailing out over an unknown sea to look for a new country vaguely sighted once years before and vaguely confirmed by the word of a small boy and a dead slave. 500 years later, people were not slow to say that Christopher Columbus was mad when he set out to imitate America's first discoveries, and Columbus did not stow his entire household aboard one ship. Wife, children, animals, and all. Moreover, he had beside his own strong will and purpose the backing of the King of Spain. He knew the use of the compass and of the first rough astronomical instruments. Eric had no such help. He set his course by the sun in the daytime and the stars, particularly the Pleiades, at night, and by instinct. But behind the instinct lay not only his own ability and experience, but that of his countrymen, gained over hundreds of years. Julius Caesar tells of seeing just such a double-ended ships at the Vikings used. Rock carvings in Scandinavian indicate that even in Caesar's time, Norse shipbuilding had a long history behind it. Many of the Norse ships, indeed, were bigger than those of Columbus. The famous long serpent, which King Olaf Tryggvason of Norway built just a few years after Eric's voyage to Greenland, and which Leif saw in Norway, carried most 1,000 men. Eric's ship was smaller than that, of course, and built higher amidships for the rough Atlantic weather. She carried a big square sail, worked ropes of walrus hide for breasting headwinds and coasting along the shore. Oars could be run out through holes in the side that closed with little shutters when not in the right, or starboard, steerboard side. Eric's ship was decked over fore and aft, and over the open waist of the vessel a tent could be slung. She was about 90 feet long, and carved dragon's head, decorated with gilt, was fixed to her bow. So equipped, Eric set out. With him went 40 stout men, his family, a few slaves, and as many of the farm animals as they could carry. Food for a voyage of several weeks was stowed aboard, but Eric planned to live mainly off the land he came to. It was on a fine day in the late May that his men rowed out into the Breda Fjord, and then, as the wind reached them, hoisted the sail. 3 other ships, manned by his friends, sailed out to see Eric, safe away from the vengeance of his enemies, and to bid him farewell. A long farewell it would be, they knew, even if things went well. Possibly, most probably, they might be looking their last on the big red-haired man who was determined to sail into the unknown. As the Norse well knew, no man could escape the end which the fates had ordained for him. But this was no reason to fear. Rather, it was a reason to leave behind a name and a reputation for adventure, for honor, and for courage. As they came into the open ocean, Leif took his last look at Iceland over the stern, where the dragon's tail of the ship reared itself high. His father's friends brought their ship about and cried out their goodbyes. Then they beat back to the shore, and that meaning that they were drumming on their way back. They beat back to shore, where the tall cone of Mount Snæfell dominated the rocky land. I'll spell it. Mount Snæfell, capital Snaefel, dominated the rocky land. Soon even their bright sails were lost to sight, and only Mount Snæfell looked out over the brooding sea. But the dragon ship set her prow firmly into the waves, and with the wind behind her rushed away to the west, on the track of St. Brendan. That evening Leif had fresh milk from the cows aboard to drink, and a big bowl of porridge, which he and Brendan ate together with carved horn spoons. And again, St. Brendan was the name that Brandon's mother named him after, St. Brendan. They ate together with carved horn spoons. Then they lay down among the sacks of provisions and the chests of household goods. Through the short night they slept to the tune of the rushing water and the wind in the rigging. And in the morning Snæfell was no longer there, and the ships drove through a waste of water. So the days passed, for almost a week. Sometimes Leif sat by the man at the steering oar, or to learn as much as he could of seamanship. In other times he watched how the men handled the sail to get the best of the wind, and how Eric at sunrise and sunset took bearings to check his course. They were true seafarers. In between times, Leif and Brandon played with Helgi, gloomy at being tired under the foredeck and unable to chase the foolish chickens who squawked so near him. Remember, Helgi was their puppy. Tiring of that, they challenged each other to a regular tournament of checkers, which they played on a little board set with pegs to hold the pieces still when the ship rolled back and forth, sideways, up and down, and all around. Stories they told each other by the dozen, and begged more from the men and from Brandon's mother, Bridget, who had fond of Irish tales. But Leif missed Bajanari, who knew the best stories of all, but whose wound had not healed well enough for him to sail with Eric. When we grow up, Leif confided to Brandon, we shall do things that will be told after us for years and years. Little did he think that he was already embarked on an adventure that would fire the hearts of men for 10 centuries to come. One morning Leif was wakened by a hoarse shout and laid blinking for a moment, wondering where he could be. The movement of the ship had just begun to tell him that he was at sea and on a great adventure. When the shout was repeated, Leif sat up. On the prow of the vessel stood Harold, his hands cupped about his eyes as he squinted across the bright sea. Men gathered about him, and in the stern Eric stood up by the steering oar, and he exclaimed, "Land!" cried Harold again. "Land ahead!" Leif couldn't see anything. "Let me see!" Let me see, he shouted, making his way to the men about Harold. They let him through, and he tugged at the herald's belt impatiently. Ahead to starboard, said Harold, and picked the boy up. Following Harold's pointing finger, Leif saw a line of snow-capped peaks glinting in the moving sun. Higher they reached than any mountains he could have imagined. High and cold and lonely, he drew in his breath. Here was land indeed, land to be conquered by strong men. How the waves must break on that rugged shore, foaming and waving and hitting the shore with a rhythmic pattern. Yet not for a moment did Leif doubt that his father could make a home for them there. All that day they drew in closer to the shore, but in the afternoon the wind dropped and fog came up and hid the nearing coastline. Out the oars, cried Eric. Let's sleep ashore tonight. As the men swung the heavy sweeps, the ship pressed stoutly on. The fog was cold and growing colder. Leif wrapped a woolen cloak about himself before he went forward to the prow of the ship to join Thorsten, who had taken Harold's place as lookout. So I guess woolen cloaks are a way to prohibit water from coming onto your skin, because wool is very protective. In the silence of the fog, the ship crept on, the oars cracking in the rowlocks. Suddenly, "What's that?" cried Leif, and just then Thorsten shouted, "Ice! Ice! Keep her off!" Looming ahead through the mist, almost over them, was a towering mass of ice. It was a drifting iceberg. Swiftly, 30 oars backed the ship away, and the iceberg faded in the fog. "Sleep ashore tonight, will we, Eric?" called one of the men. "We're more'n likely to sleep at the bottom of the sea." "We won't sleep in either place," said Eric calmly. "We'll stand offshore till the fog lifts and we know where we are. Row out strongly. Nothing is won without a bit of trowel, lads. Remember the words of Odin's song. The unwise man thinks he will live forever if he shuns fight, but old age gives him no peace, through spears may spare him." Eric pointed at the shore ahead. "We have something new to fight here instead of spears," he said, "but the song is still true. Across the sea we've come with a fair wind and found a new land. Are you going to cry now because it doesn't fall into our hands at once? Row out, row out. Tomorrow is a day too." But tomorrow, when it came, showed that Eric's landfall was not going to be quickly gained. All along the rocky coast a stretch of ice lay, not solid, but broken as the summer began to thaw it into a hungry pack of ice blocks. Between these blocks, the strongest ship could be cracked as if she were a nutshell. Again and again Eric ordered his men to the oars as a lane of free water seemed to open and give promise to letting them ashore. Again and again the ice began to close in, and they had to fight their way out through the floating menace. Lucky it was that the stout Viking ship was built with a stern and as sharp as her bow. She was built with a stern as sharp as her bow and could be moved easily in either direction. And lucky it was that Eric of the keen eyes and the stout heart was in command. In other words, he had eagle eyes. At last, even Eric gave up the attempt to land on this forbidding east coast of Greenland with its guardian demons of ice. It was clear that even if they got ashore safe, they would never know when they could get out again. So Eric gave the order to follow the coastline southward, standing well offshore from the ice pack. For weeks, then, through cold and fog which darkened even the lightning of summer days, they beat to the south, using the oars more often than the sail. So again I'm going to repeat it. For weeks, then, through cold and fog which darkened even the lengthening summer days, they beat to the south, using the oars more often than the sail. So they were out there along the coastline for weeks, and they couldn't move inward to the shore. At length, the land fell away, and they saw a tall headland standing high above the sea. This they doubled cautiously, straining against the Greenland current, which, driving to the south, still brings icebergs down along the Labrador coast. Suddenly the ice was gone. Rugged mountains still ranged above them, but they were broken by deep bays on whose friendly shores the grass grew green. Land at last! Now that it had been reached, Eric was choosy about where to set up camp. With breathtaking slowness, or so it seemed to Leif, the men rowed and rowed the ship into the mouth of one of the fjords, where forward stood Leif. Forward stood Leif with Brennan by his side, watching the land grow nearer and nearer and nearer take form. "Look, look!" cried Brendan suddenly. "There are men swimming!" Turning his eyes from the land, Leif saw a dozen dark heads in the water. Behind them, Eric laughed. "They're seals!" he said. "Watch them dive. Even if men could swim in this cold water, they couldn't stay under so long." "No, there are no men there. No one to hunt or be hunted." They were seals. Then he was silent, peering ahead. At last he called back to the man at the helm. "That's an inland to Labrador. We'll land there." The ship was too big to beach, nor did the rough shore look too inviting. Eric set her broadside onto the land, and a small boat was lowered. Harold and Thurston dropped down to take the oars, and the boys tumbled hastily after them. Eric followed, and they rowed ashore. "You first, Leif," said Eric as the boat grounded gently. "Step first on the land where you will grow up and hold your homestead when you are a man." And Leif leaped out onto the shore of Greenland. He took 2 steps and promptly sat down. "The ground moves," he cried. "I can't walk." Eric jumped ashore, laughing. "You've been at sea so long, you've lost your land legs," he said. "No, this good ground is solid, Eric's Island. We'll call it EricThe, and here we'll camp. There's a good pasture for the cattle and sheep, and scrub wood aplenty to burn." So they called it after Eric, EricThe. Then there was a bustle of landing indeed. The 3 small boats that Eric's ship carried piled steadily between the ship and shore with men and cargo. Iron axes rang out as wood was cut for fires and for poles on which tents were pitched. The cattle, too big for the boats to take, were forced over the side of the ship to swim ashore. That must have been a sight. Frightened and furious, they loud, "Moo! Moo!" coming up out of the cold waters, shaking their heads. The dog Helgi broke loose, took a great leap over the gunwale, and swam ashore barking. On land he gave himself a great shake that sent the water flying from his coat. What a summer that was! Here was a whole new continent to be explored, empty of men and barren it might seem, but men who had lived long in the northwest of Iceland were used to barren prospects. The water and the land were full of animal life, seals, walrus, and narwhals, foxes, and caribou, which made fine eating. Eric set part of his men to building shelters against the winter for themselves and the animals. Others gathered hay to heap in the low barns they constructed of stones and turf. With his best hunters, Eric explored the mainland back to the great ice cap that has not melted for thousands of years. Along the shore between the glaciers was land that an Icelander would know how to make fertile, and the hunting was magnificent. With him went the boys on shaggy Iceland ponies. Son of the Vikings and Irish slave alike felt themselves to be the emperors of this vast, new world. When winter set in, they went back to the island, well stocked, now with hay for the animals and dried seal and caribou meat for the men. Their camp at the tip of the Greenland lay actually farther south than the home they had left behind in Iceland, and the sun stayed and then longer and returned sooner than there. Still, everyone was glad when the snow melted and spring returned and they were able to go out again. Now here's a picture of the waters and the land were full of animal life, which made fine eating. So here we have the caribou, and we have the men hunting, and of course the women had to help skin the animals for the meat, and they were basically the people that cooked the wild meat. And I will tell you that meat, especially pork, is your only source of thiamine, and your brain functions on that nutrient, thiamine. And also meat, the iron in meat is the most readily absorbed iron as a nutrient, and that's why it's so important to have meat in your diet. And organ meats are very high in nutrients, and so liver is very good to consume. And again, moderation with any food substance is key to having a healthy, balanced, nutritious diet. So here's the picture. They had to hunt for their food, and what a task that was. So again, the mainland was well stocked now with hay for the animals and dried seal and caribou meat for the men. Their camp at the tip of Greenland lay actually farther south than the home they had left behind in Iceland, and the sun stayed with them longer and returned sooner than there. Still, everyone was glad when the snow melted and spring returned and they were able to get about again. Seeing that the ice left the ford fairly early, Eric set some of his party to building a more comfortable home on the mainland. When the work was well begun, he took the ship north along the coast. It seemed at first that the ice cap would come down to the water's edge, leaving no foothold for the men at all. But as they went further north, the glaciers retreated inland again, and Eric found other stretches of land for farming, and even richer hunting grounds. Here it was that they had found the first polar bears. whose skins were to lie before the fires and cover them warmly during the long winter nights. And here it was that they made an even more exciting discovery, the traces of men. It was queer contraption of sewn skins ribbed with whalebone that they found first, and they might have puzzled over it for days if Brandon had not identified it. "It's a skin boat," he cried, "just so, almost so, the Irish make them, though it's very small, but Leif, I told you St. Brandon came here. It's an Irish skin boat, sewn together with sinew. See, and the bones hold the shape." "But I thought Irish coracles were almost round," Leif objected. "This is long and pointed and nearly covered over. See, there's just one hole here where a man sat to row it." "Well," said Brandon doggedly, "this is better for these rough waters. The Irish are very clever people. They thought up this new design, of course. Independent thinkers." And though Leif argued that the boat looked more like something made by strange people native to this new land, nothing would shake Brandon in his belief that the Irish had settled in Greenland long before Eric came. When Thurston found a little collection of ivory and bone needles and a comb, together with a stone axe, Brandon calmly claimed them as Irish too. Constantly, as they explored the shore, Brandon expected to find an old Irish hermit, worshipping God next to the Arctic Circle in the midst of eternal ice. He thought he had found one once and ran up to the big dark shape on shore, crying greetings in the politest Gaelic. Just then the creature that Brandon had thought to be a hermit rolled over, stretched with the flipper, and fell into the water, to reveal himself as the most respectable old walrus. And here's a picture of a walrus. And that walrus lived in Iceland, Greenland, the Arctic Circle. It's a fine walrus. You can watch the picture show. I gotta change the DVD. I hope you're enjoying the picture show. There's strawberries. Those are strawberries. So we'll put some focus on the picture show. Okay, so they discovered the walrus. They spent that winter in the new house at EricThe Red, and the next summer Eric explored minutely the neighborhood where he had first landed, working up the fjord and calculating how many families could support themselves on its shores. By this time, Leif and Brandon had grown quite out of their clothes that they had brought from Iceland, so they were in Greenland. So they left Iceland and came to Greenland. Their mother spent the third winter weaving and sewing for them, and for Leif's little brother, in the spring they were going back to Iceland. Eric's period of outlawry was over. At last, the returning sun melted the ice. The water was ready to receive the ship, which had slept through the winter, cradled on shore like one of the cows in the barn. Over the wooden rollers, the ship crept into the water as if eager to leave the land behind. Then came a busy loading for departure, and the ship stood out to sea. Behind them, southern Greenland fell back into the frozen slumber. No ringing axe to break the stillness, no cattle calling, no dog to bark, no voices to shout from hill to hill. Only in the far north the dark, strange little Eskimo men piled their kayaks through the water after seal and hurled their harpoons at walrus and polar bear. They were ignorant still, and would be for years to come, of the tall, fair invaders of their land. Greenland was empty again. A new chapter, a new home, and a new land. So here we go. Let's see if I can show you this picture. There's the Viking ship, which is a vessel. It's a ship. And there's the icebergs. That's Greenland, and they're leaving Greenland. So the ship took off, and let's continue to read. But Greenland would not be empty for long. Eric planned to return, not alone, but with many shiploads of colonists for new country. It was on the voyage to Iceland that he gave the new land its name. Iceland! And I have something to share with you. Here's my muff. I don't know if you could see this, but I have a muff. This is a muff. And it's made out of black lamb. And it's very warm. It's sheep. So this is made out of sheep. So, well, you really can't see it. But there I put my... It's kind of hard. But in my Pittsburgh Victorian shows, I wear a muff. So it's really pretty. It's very pretty. It's very soft,